He was kicked out of a fancy restaurant without knowing he was the new owner. Marcus Johnson didn't expect his life to change completely that Thursday in March. The 28-year-old entrepreneur had just finished a morning-long meeting and decided to have lunch alone, choosing the Royale, the most elegant restaurant in New York City. Wearing a simple beige sweater his mother had given him for Christmas, Marcus pushed open the glass door of the establishment and was greeted by the aroma of fine spices and the soft sound of classical music. He had barely taken 2 steps when he felt a firm hand on his arm. "Excuse me, sir," said a deep voice behind him. Marcus turned and saw a tall, imposing, bald man wearing an impeccable black suit. "I need to speak with you." "Of course, how can I help?" Marcus replied politely, assuming it was about his reservation. The man discreetly pulled him to a corner near the entrance, away from the other customers already seated at their tables. His name tag read, "Richard Thompson, General Manager." "Look, I'll be direct with you." Richard lowered his voice, but his tone was firm and intimidating. "This is a high-end restaurant. Our clients expect a certain atmosphere. You understand, right?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The words weren't explicit, but the message was clear. He looked around and noticed all the customers were white, well-dressed, some wearing expensive jewelry and gold watches. The conversations paused for a moment, as if everyone was paying attention to the awkward scene unfolding near the entrance. "I don't understand," Marcus tried to stay calm. "I made a reservation for lunch." "My name is Marcus Johnson." Richard checked a gold clipboard and shook his head. "I don't have a reservation under that name, and even if I did, we have the right to refuse service when we feel someone doesn't fit the profile of our establishment." Marcus's cheeks grew hot. He knew exactly what was happening, but he couldn't believe this still existed in the 21st century. He took a deep breath, trying to control the anger bubbling in his chest. "Can you tell me exactly what's wrong with my profile?" he asked, raising his voice slightly. Richard glanced around, noticing some customers were starting to pay attention. He gripped Marcus's arm more firmly and guided him toward the exit. "Sir, please, let's not make a scene here. You know exactly what I'm talking about. This place isn't for people like you." The words hit Marcus like a slap. He felt all the humiliations of his childhood rushing back at once. The times he was followed in stores, the suspicious looks, the whispered comments. He thought that at 28, with a degree in business administration from Harvard and as the owner of a promising tech company, these situations would be in the past. A blonde woman in her 60s, seated at a table near the window, stopped eating and watched the scene with discomfort. She wore a light pink suit and pearls around her neck, clearly part of New York's elite, but her eyes showed concern for what she was witnessing. "Richard," she called softly, "is there a problem?" The manager forced a smile. "No problem at all, Mrs. Barbara. Just a misunderstanding that's being resolved." Marcus saw his chance. If he made a scene, maybe he could at least expose the discrimination he was facing. But something inside him, maybe pride or the upbringing his parents had given him, made him keep his dignity. "There's no misunderstanding," Marcus said, looking directly at Mrs. Barbara. "This gentleman is kicking me out of the restaurant because he thinks I don't fit the right profile to dine here." Mrs. Barbara dropped her fork and brought a hand to her chest, visibly shocked. Other guests began whispering among themselves. Some seemed embarrassed, others merely curious. Richard tightened his grip on Marcus's arm. "Sir, you're creating an unpleasant atmosphere for our guests. I'll have to ask you to leave immediately, or I'll need to call security." Marcus glanced around the restaurant one last time. The walls were adorned with expensive paintings. A grand piano stood in the center of the room, and crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow. It was exactly the kind of place he'd dreamed of dining in as a child, back when his mother took him along to clean homes in upscale neighborhoods. "All right," Marcus finally said, "I'll leave, but know this, it won't end here." Richard smiled smugly and escorted him to the door. "Of course, sir. You're free to complain wherever you like. We have our rights too." When Marcus stepped outside, the March sun hit his face. The street was bustling with executives rushing back and forth, luxury cars speeding past. He stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now back to the story. His phone rang. It was Jennifer, his business partner and lawyer, and his best friend since college. "Mark, how did the meeting go? Did you close the acquisition deal?" Marcus had completely forgotten about the morning meeting. For the past 3 months, he and Jennifer had been negotiating the purchase of a holding company that owned several establishments in New York. It was the biggest deal of his life, one that could turn his small tech company into an empire. "The meeting went great, Jennifer. They accepted our offer. The papers should be signed next week." "That's wonderful. Let's celebrate. Where are you?" Marcus looked back at the restaurant where he'd been humiliated just minutes earlier. "I'm outside the Royale. Tried to have lunch here, but there was a problem." "What kind of problem?" Marcus recounted the whole story to Jennifer, feeling his anger rise again as he described every detail of the humiliation. On the other end of the line, Jennifer was silent for a long time. "Mark, you won't believe what I'm about to tell you," she finally said, her voice trembling. "What is it?" "The Royale. That restaurant is part of the holding company we're buying." Marcus's legs nearly gave out. He leaned against a tree on the sidewalk, trying to process the information. "What do you mean, Jennifer?" "It's on the list of properties. I have it right here. The Royale Restaurant LLC, owned by Robert Anderson. It's one of the 12 establishments in the holding." The irony of the situation was so absurd, Marcus almost laughed. In a week, he'd be the owner of the restaurant that had just kicked him out. "Jennifer, are you absolutely sure?" "I have all the documents right here. Mark, in a week, you'll be the boss of the man who humiliated you today." Marcus looked back at the restaurant. Through the large glass window, he could see Richard chatting animatedly with Mrs. Barbara, likely making up some excuse for what had happened. "Jennifer, I need you to do something very important for me." "What do you want me to do?" "Don't tell anyone about what happened today. And most importantly, don't let any word about the acquisition leak. I want this to be a total surprise." "Mark, are you planning some kind of revenge?" Marcus smiled for the first time since leaving the restaurant. "It's not revenge, Jennifer. It's justice." In the following days, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He decided to conduct an experiment. He put on his best suit, a Brooks Brothers he had bought for special occasions, and returned to the Royale the next Friday. This time, when he pushed the glass door, he was greeted by the hostess, a brunette woman around 45 years old with her hair tied in an elegant bun and a genuine smile on her face. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I assist you?" "I'd like a table for one, please." The hostess checked her reservation book. "Of course, sir. We have a table available. Please follow me." Marcus was being led to a table when he heard Richard's familiar voice coming from the reception. "Mrs. Patricia, who is that man you're seating?" The hostess, who apparently was named Patricia, turned to answer. "He's a customer, Mr. Richard. He asked for a table for lunch." Richard quickly walked over to where they were standing. When he saw Marcus, his expression changed completely. "You're not welcome here," Richard said bluntly. "We already discussed this yesterday." Patricia looked from Marcus to Richard, clearly confused. "But Mr. Richard, the gentleman is well dressed and behaving appropriately. What's the issue?" "The issue, Mrs. Patricia, is that I know this type of person. They come here to cause trouble, harass our customers. I don't want this man in my restaurant." Marcus felt the same mix of anger and humiliation as the day before, but this time he decided not to leave quietly. "Your restaurant?" he asked, emphasizing the word your. "I'm the general manager. I decide who can or cannot dine in this establishment." Patricia seemed extremely uncomfortable with the situation. Marcus noticed she didn't agree with her boss's attitude, but couldn't do anything without risking her job. "Mr. Richard," Patricia tried to intervene, "perhaps we could seat the gentleman at a more private table?" "Mrs. Patricia, he will not be seated at any table, and you'll learn not to question my decisions if you want to keep working here." Marcus saw tears forming in Patricia's eyes. She lowered her head and murmured an apology to him. "It's not your fault," Marcus said gently to Patricia. "You've done nothing wrong." He turned to Richard. "One day, Mr. Richard, you'll deeply regret how you've treated me." Richard laughed mockingly. "Is that a threat?" "No, it's a promise." Marcus left the restaurant again, but this time with a clear plan. He spent the weekend researching everything about the Royale. He discovered the establishment had been around for 15 years and always had an excellent reputation. Robert Anderson, the owner, was a respected businessman who rarely visited the restaurant, leaving management entirely in Richard's hands. On Monday, Marcus decided to conduct a broader test. He asked some friends from different backgrounds and social classes to try dining at the Royale throughout the week. Tyrone, his African-American friend who worked as a doctor, was the first. Even though he wore an expensive suit and arrived in a Lexus, he was turned away at the door by Richard, who claimed there were no tables available, even though the restaurant was visibly empty. Ashley, his white, successful lawyer friend, was treated like royalty. Richard personally escorted her to the best table and ensured she received top-notch service. Mike, his cousin who worked as a construction worker, didn't even make it past the door. Richard kicked him out before he could speak, claiming he didn't meet the establishment's dress code. The most shocking experience was with Mrs. Dorothy, a 68-year-old African-American woman who worked as a housekeeper and was a neighbor of Marcus's mother. She had saved for months to take her 12-year-old grandson to a fancy restaurant for his birthday. When Mrs. Dorothy arrived at the Royale by bus, accompanied by the visibly nervous and excited boy, Richard didn't even let them inside. "This isn't the place for you," he said coldly. "You'd feel more comfortable at a different kind of establishment." The boy started crying, and Mrs. Dorothy had to console him on the sidewalk, explaining that maybe they could try another restaurant. Marcus, who had been watching from a distance, felt his heart break at the scene. It was in that moment he decided he wouldn't wait for the contracts to be signed. He needed to act immediately. Marcus called Jennifer. "I want to speed up the acquisition process. Can we sign the papers this week?" "Mark, calm down. What's the rush? What happened?" Marcus told her about all the tests he'd done and what he'd witnessed with Mrs. Dorothy and her grandson. "Jennifer, this man isn't just discriminating against me. He's humiliating people every day. I can't let this continue." Jennifer was silent for a moment. "Mark, I understand your anger, but you need to think clearly. If you rush the process too much, it could raise suspicions. Besides, what if Richard finds out who you are before signing? He might try to sabotage the deal." "Then here's what we'll do," Marcus said after a pause. "Keep everything absolutely confidential, but move as fast as possible. I want the signing to happen on Friday." "Friday?" "Mark, that's practically impossible. Jennifer, you're the best lawyer I know. If anyone can make it happen, it's you." Tuesday brought an unpleasant surprise. Marcus was in his office when he got a call from Tyrone. "Mark, you need to hear this. I went back to the Royale today to try one more time." "And?" "The manager recognized me. He said he knew I was your friend and that you were plotting something against the restaurant." Marcus felt a chill in his stomach. "Did he say anything else?" "He said if any of us show up there again, he'll call security. And more, Mark, he seems to be investigating you." "Investigating how?" "He was asking about your work, your company. I think he suspects something." Marcus hung up worried. If Richard found out about the acquisition before the contracts were signed, everything could fall apart. He immediately called Jennifer. "Jennifer, we need to move even faster. I think Richard is onto something. Mark, I have good news and bad news. Bad news first. Robert Anderson wants an in-person meeting with you before signing. He requested it. And the good news. The meeting is tomorrow. If all goes well, we can sign on Thursday." "Where's the meeting?" Jennifer paused dramatically. "At the Royale." Marcus nearly dropped the phone. "Jennifer, you can't be serious. He said he wants you to see one of the holding's flagship establishments. It'll be a business lunch. What if Richard recognizes me and ruins everything?" "Mark, you'll have to trust me. I have a plan." Wednesday morning, Marcus dressed more carefully than ever in his life. He wore his best suit, got a haircut, shaved, and even bought an expensive watch for the occasion. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. Jennifer met him in front of the restaurant. "Ready for the performance of your life?" she asked with a nervous smile. "Honestly, I'm terrified. Remember what we discussed yesterday? Robert doesn't know Richard personally. He hardly ever comes here. If Richard tries anything, you use that to your advantage." They walked into the restaurant together. Marcus kept his head down and followed Jennifer to a table at the back of the dining room, where a man around 55 years old with graying hair and a friendly smile was already waiting. "Marcus Johnson?" The man stood up and extended his hand. "Robert Anderson." "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Anderson." They sat down and began discussing business. Marcus was so nervous he could barely focus on the conversation, expecting Richard to appear at any moment and ruin everything. "This restaurant is one of the jewels of my holding company," Robert said, gesturing around. "The manager, Richard, is exceptional. He increased profits by 40% over the last 2 years." Marcus nearly choked on the water he was drinking. 40%? That's impressive. How did he manage that? "Well, he implemented a policy of, how should I put it, client selection. We focus on serving only high-income customers. That allowed us to raise prices and improve profit margins." Jennifer kicked Marcus under the table, noticing he was visibly upset. "Client selection?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Exactly. Richard created strict criteria. We only accept clients who fit the establishment's profile. It's a very smart marketing strategy." At that moment, as if summoned, Richard appeared beside the table. "Mr. Anderson, what a wonderful surprise to have you here." Robert smiled and made the introductions. "Richard, I'd like you to meet Marcus Johnson and Jennifer Wilson. They might become our new partners." Richard greeted Jennifer politely, but when his eyes met Marcus's, there was a moment of mutual recognition. Marcus saw Richard's expression change subtly. "It's a pleasure to meet you," Richard said, but his tone was different. "Richard, I was just telling Marcus about your excellent client selection policy." Marcus watched Richard carefully. The man was clearly uncomfortable but trying to hide it. "Yes, we have high standards here," Richard stammered slightly. "What kind of standards?" Marcus asked, looking directly into Richard's eyes. "Well, we observe behavior, attire, whether the person fits the environment." "I see," Marcus said slowly. "And how do you determine if someone fits the environment?" Richard was visibly sweating now. He glanced at Robert, seeking help, but the owner was smiling, thinking it was just normal business talk. "It's more of a feeling, you know. Experience." Marcus was about to confront Richard directly when Jennifer intervened. "Mr. Richard, would it be possible for you to show us the kitchen? I'd love to see the facilities." "Of course." Richard seemed relieved to step away from the table. "Please follow me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. As they toured the kitchen, Marcus took the opportunity to observe the staff. Most were African American and mixed race, but they all worked behind the scenes, away from customers' eyes. The waiters serving the tables were all white and well-groomed. In the kitchen, Marcus met Deshawn, the sous chef, a black man around 45 who seemed extremely competent and dedicated. When Richard stepped away for a moment to speak with another employee, Deshawn approached Marcus. "Sir, can I speak with you privately for a minute?" Marcus nodded to Jennifer, who distracted Robert with questions about suppliers. "You seem like an important person," Deshawn whispered. "I need to tell you something about how this place really works." "What do you mean?" "Mr. Richard, he's not a good person. He treats black employees poorly, pays us less, and I've seen him kick out customers just because of their skin color." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Are you sure about this?" "I am, sir. I've worked here for 8 years. I've seen a lot. Last week he kicked out a black doctor who came to dine with his wife. The man was impeccably dressed, but Mr. Richard said he didn't look like someone who could pay the bill." "Why are you telling me this?" Deshawn looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Because I saw how you looked at him during the conversation. You have the power to do something, don't you?" Before Marcus could respond, Richard returned. "Deshawn, you should be working, not chatting with our guests." "Sorry, Mr. Richard. I was just explaining the menu. Get back to work." Deshawn lowered his head and walked away, but not before giving Marcus a meaningful glance. The rest of lunch passed without major incidents. Robert was impressed with Marcus's knowledge of the food industry and was already speaking openly about the partnership as if it were a done deal. "Marcus, I have a good feeling about you," Robert said as they had coffee. "How about we sign the papers tomorrow?" Marcus could barely hide his surprise and joy. "That would be perfect for me, Mr. Robert." "Great. Jennifer, can you arrange all the documents for tomorrow morning?" "Of course, Mr. Robert. Everything will be ready." As they were saying goodbye, Richard approached again. "It was a pleasure meeting you. I hope to see you here often soon." Marcus shook Richard's hand and smiled. "You can count on seeing me very soon, Mr. Richard." Very soon indeed. There was something in Marcus's tone that made Richard suspicious, but he couldn't quite place it. Thursday arrived as the most important day of Marcus's life. He had barely slept, thinking about everything that was about to happen. At 9 a.m., he was at the notary's office with Jennifer and Robert, signing the papers that would make him the owner of a holding company that included 12 establishments, among them the Royale. "Congratulations, Marcus," Robert said, shaking his hand after the last signature. "You are now officially the owner of all the holdings establishments. I hope you'll be very happy and prosperous." "Thank you so much, Mr. Robert. You have no idea how much this means to me." As soon as Robert left, Jennifer turned to Marcus. "So now what? What's the plan?" Marcus looked at the documents proving his ownership of the Royale. "Now, my dear Jennifer, we're going to pay an unexpected little visit to our restaurant." On Friday morning, Marcus woke up with a strange feeling. After so many days planning this moment, it was hard to believe the time had finally come. He chose his outfit carefully, the same beige sweater he'd worn the day he was humiliated. Jennifer met him in front of the Royale at 11:30 a.m. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked for the 10th time. "Jennifer, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." They entered the restaurant together. It was moderately busy, with several tables occupied by lunch guests. Marcus went straight to the reception desk, where Patricia was organizing the reservation book. "Good morning, Mrs. Patricia," Marcus said with a genuine smile. Patricia looked up and recognized him immediately. Her face turned pale. "Sir, you can't be here. Mr. Richard said that—" "Mrs. Patricia, could you please call Mr. Richard? I need to speak with him urgently." "Sir, please, I don't want any trouble. Mr. Richard gets very angry when—" "Mrs. Patricia," Marcus said gently, placing his hand over hers. "Trust me. Everything will be fine." Patricia hesitated for a moment, then went to call Richard. He appeared in less than a minute, visibly irritated. "I can't believe you had the nerve to come back here," Richard said loudly, causing other customers to stop and watch. "I've made it clear you're not welcome in this establishment." "Mr. Richard," Marcus said calmly, taking a folder of documents from Jennifer's hand, "I need you to take a look at these papers." "What papers? I don't have time for games." Marcus pulled the property documents from the folder and handed them to Richard. "These are the papers proving I'm the new owner of the Royale." Richard looked at the documents with disdain. "This is ridiculous. You think I'd fall for a trick like this? These must be fake." "You can call Mr. Robert Anderson and confirm if you'd like," Marcus said, staying calm. The expression on Richard's face began to change. He looked more closely at the documents, then at Marcus, then back at the papers. This can't be true," he murmured. "Jennifer." Marcus turned to his partner. "Could you call Mr. Robert and ask him to confirm for Mr. Richard?" Jennifer dialed Robert's number and handed the phone to Richard. "Hello, Mr. Robert. This is Richard from the Royale. I need to confirm something. Did you sell the restaurant to a man named Marcus Johnson?" Marcus watched Richard's face grow paler as he listened to Robert's response. "Yes, sir." "Understood. Thank you very much." Richard hung up the phone and stared at Marcus in complete shock. How is this possible?" "It's possible, Mr. Richard, because appearances don't always reflect reality," Marcus said, raising his voice just enough for all the customers to hear. "You judged me by the color of my skin and my clothes, but you never bothered to find out who I really was." The restaurant's customers began to stir, whispering among themselves and trying to understand what was happening. Mrs. Barbara, the woman who had witnessed Marcus's first humiliation, was at a nearby table and stood up. "I remember you," she said, walking toward them. "You were thrown out of here last week." "That's right, Mrs. Barbara," Marcus confirmed. "I was thrown out because Mr. Richard thought people like me didn't belong in this place. Murmurs of indignation spread through the restaurant. Other customers recalled similar situations they'd witnessed. "Mr. Richard," Marcus continued, now addressing the entire restaurant, "for years you've used your position to humiliate and discriminate against people based on skin color, social class, and appearance. You created an environment where only those who fit your prejudice standards were welcome." Richard was visibly shaking. "Mr. Johnson, Marcus, I can explain." "There's no explanation, Mr. Richard. What you did to me, and so many others, is unacceptable." Marcus turned to Patricia, who was watching everything with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Patricia, were you fired?" "No, sir," she replied, confused. "Good, because from now on, you're the new general manager of the Royale." Patricia brought her hands to her chest, shocked. "But sir, I don't know if—" "You've always treated every customer with respect and dignity, even when pressured to do otherwise. That's exactly the kind of person I want leading this place." Marcus turned back to Richard. "Mr. Richard, you're fired. As of this moment, you no longer work here." "Please," Richard began to beg. "I have a family, bills to pay. I need this job." Marcus Johnson stayed silent for a moment, watching the man who had humiliated him plead for mercy. Part of him wanted to simply fire him as he had been fired, but he knew that wasn't the kind of person he was. "Mr. Richard, I'm going to give you an opportunity you never gave me. If you're willing to work as a waiter for 6 months earning minimum wage and prove you can treat every customer with respect, no matter who they are, I'll consider reinstating you in a better position." Richard looked around the restaurant, feeling everyone's eyes on him. The humiliation was clear on his face. I accept," he murmured. "Great. Mrs. Patricia, could you arrange a waiter's uniform for Mr. Richard?" Patricia nodded, still trying to process everything happening. Marcus turned to the customers still watching the scene. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance. Starting today, the Royale will be a restaurant where everyone is welcome, regardless of color, social class, or any other factor. Our only standard will be treating everyone with the respect and dignity they deserve." The customers began to applaud. Mrs. Barbara approached Marcus. "Sir, I want to apologize. I should have stepped in more last week when I saw how you were treated." "Mrs. Barbara, you have nothing to apologize for. What matters is that now, everything will change." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Marcus asked all the staff to gather in the main dining room. Deshawn, the sous chef who had spoken with him during the tour, was beaming. "Everyone," Marcus began, looking at the anxious faces before him. "My name is Marcus Johnson, and I'm the new owner of the Royale. I know many of you have faced discrimination and unfair treatment under the previous management. That ends today." The staff exchanged glances, some visibly emotional. "From now on, you'll all have the same rights and opportunities. There will be no more division between kitchen and dining staff based on color or background. Whoever has the ability and desire can work in any position." Sharon, one of the African-American cooks, raised her hand hesitantly. "Mr. Marcus, does that mean we can work as waitresses too?" "Sharon, that means you can work wherever you want and wherever you feel most fulfilled, as long as you have the skills for it." Tears began rolling down Sharon's face. "Additionally," Marcus continued, "you'll all receive a 30% raise and we'll implement a profit-sharing program." The staff erupted in applause, some crying with emotion. "Deshawn," Marcus called to the sous chef, "would you like to be promoted to head chef?" Deshawn's eyes widened. "Mr. Marcus, I don't know what to say. Of course I would." "Then it's settled. Starting Monday, you're the new head chef of the Royale." Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon reorganizing the restaurant. He implemented new service policies, adjusted the menu to include more affordable options at certain times, and established a clear code of conduct for all employees. As he was about to leave, Patricia approached him. "Mr. Marcus, I still can't believe everything that happened today. Why did you do this?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "Mrs. Patricia, when I was a child, my mother worked as a maid for a wealthy family. I always dreamed of being able to frequent the same places they did, eat at the same restaurants, and be treated with the same respect. Today, I discovered that having money isn't enough to guarantee dignity. Some people will always judge us by our appearance, but I also learned that when you have power, you can use it to build a better world. You're a very special person, Mr. Marcus. No, Mrs. Patricia. I'm just someone who had the opportunity to make a difference and decided to take it. The following Saturday, Marcus decided to test his changes for the first time. He invited Mrs. Dorothy and her grandson to lunch at the Royale as special guests of the house. When they arrived, Patricia greeted them personally with a warm smile. "Mrs. Dorothy, what a pleasure to have you with us. Your table is ready." The boy, who had cried the week before, was now grinning from ear to ear. They were led to the best table in the restaurant, near the window with a view of the bustling street. Deshawn, the new chef, made sure to personally prepare the most special dishes on the menu. When Mrs. Dorothy saw the bill at the end of the meal marked "Compliments of the House," she couldn't hold back her tears. "Mr. Marcus," she said when he came to greet them, "you have no idea what this means to us." "Mrs. Dorothy, you don't need to thank me. This restaurant is now a place where everyone is welcome." Mrs. Dorothy's grandson, a bright 12-year-old named Jamal, looked at Marcus with admiration. "Mr. Marcus, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." "Jamal, you can be better than me. Just always treat people with respect and kindness." In the weeks that followed, news of the changes at the Royale spread through the city. Local papers ran stories about the restaurant's transformation, and Marcus began receiving invitations to speak about inclusion and diversity at business events. Tyrone, his doctor friend, returned to the restaurant and was treated like royalty. He had lunch with his wife and remarked to Marcus, "Man, the difference is incredible. The atmosphere here has completely changed. Before it was heavy, tense. Now it's warm, joyful." "That's what happens when you remove prejudice and discrimination," Marcus replied. "People become happier, more relaxed." A month after the transformation, Marcus received an unexpected visit. Richard showed up at the restaurant wearing his waiter's uniform, but clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Marcus, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Richard. How have these weeks been for you?" Richard lowered his head. "Tough, really tough. But I'm learning things I never imagined." "What kind of things?" "This week I served an African-American family who came for dinner. At first, I admit I felt uneasy, but as I talked to them, I learned the father was an engineer, the mother was a college professor, and their kids were exemplary students. They were amazing people, and I almost kicked them out last week just because of their skin color." Marcus studied Richard carefully. There was something different in his eyes, a humility that wasn't there before. "How does that make you feel?" "Ashamed, really ashamed. I spent years judging people without knowing them. How many incredible opportunities to meet good people did I miss?" "Richard, what matters isn't what you did in the past, but what you do from now on." "Mr. Marcus, I want to apologize for what I did to you and for everything I've done to others over the years." Marcus was silent for a moment, processing Richard's words. "Your apology is accepted, Richard, but now you need to prove you've truly changed." 3 months later, Marcus was reviewing the restaurant's numbers with Jennifer when he noticed something surprising. "Jennifer, are these numbers correct?" "Yes, they are. Why the surprise?" "Revenue increased by 60% in 3 months." "Mark, this shouldn't surprise you. When you remove artificial barriers and welcome all customers, you naturally expand your consumer base." "It's not just that," Marcus said, examining the reports more closely. "Employee satisfaction has increased, turnover has decreased, and even the quality of the food has improved. That's what happens when people work happy and motivated." Deshawn walked into the office carrying a tray with new dishes he was testing. "Mr. Johnson, Jennifer, could you try these recipes? They're traditional American dishes I want to add to the menu." Marcus took a bite of the hush puppies prepared by Deshawn and smiled. "Deshawn, this is delicious. It's exactly the kind of food that will bring even more diversity to our restaurant." "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You know, I've been working with Richard these past few weeks, teaching him about the ingredients and the history behind each African-American dish. He's really interested in learning. How's he doing as a waiter? At first it was hard. He was clearly uncomfortable. But these last few weeks, I've seen a real change in him. Yesterday I watched him talk for over 10 minutes with an elderly African-American couple, listening to stories about their youth. The Richard from 2 months ago would never have done that. Marcus grew thoughtful. Maybe people really could change when placed in the right situations. 6 months after the transformation, Marcus threw a party to celebrate the success of the new Royale. He invited all the employees, their families, and special customers who had supported the changes. The party was in full swing when Mrs. Patricia approached Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, there's someone here who'd like to speak with you." Marcus turned and saw Richard approaching, but he wasn't wearing a waiter's uniform. Instead, he wore a simple yet elegant suit. "Mr. Johnson, I came to say goodbye." "Goodbye? Are you leaving the restaurant?" "I am, sir, but not in the way you might think." Richard took a deep breath before continuing. "These 6 months working here have been the most important of my life. I've learned more about respect, dignity, and humanity than in all my previous years." "I'm glad to hear that, Richard. Mr. Johnson, I want to use everything I've learned here to make a difference somewhere else. I've been offered a position managing a restaurant in Miami, and they know my whole story. They specifically want someone who understands the importance of inclusion and diversity." Marcus smiled proudly. "Richard, that's wonderful. You have my full recommendation." "Thank you, Mr. Johnson, but before I go, I'd like to ask you for a favor." "What is it?" "I'd like to pay for a family who can't afford to eat here, as a way to give back for all the good that's happened to me these past months." Marcus was moved by the gesture. "Richard, it would be an honor to arrange that for you." A week later, Marcus was in his office when he received an unexpected call. "Marcus Johnson?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "This is the Mayor of New York City, Michael Harris. I'd like to speak with you about a very important project." Marcus was surprised. Why would the mayor be calling him? "Of course, Mr. Mayor. How can I help?" "Mr. Johnson, we've heard about the fantastic work you've done at the Royale. The transformation of that restaurant has become an example for the entire city." "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'd like to propose a partnership. The city is launching a program to encourage inclusion and diversity in businesses. We would like you to be our official ambassador and help other business owners implement policies similar to yours." Marcus Johnson fell silent for a moment, processing the magnitude of the proposal. "Mr. Mayor, it would be an honor to be part of this program." "Excellent. Can we schedule a meeting for next week?" After hanging up the phone, Marcus stared out the window of his office. Less than a year earlier, he had been humiliated and kicked out of a restaurant because of the color of his skin. Now he was being invited to lead a movement for social transformation across the city. Jennifer walked into the office and found him deep in thought. "Mark, why do you look like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders?" Marcus told her about the mayor's call. "Jennifer, do you think I'm ready for this kind of responsibility? Mark, you turned a discriminatory restaurant into the city's symbol of inclusion in 6 months. If that didn't prepare you, nothing will. It's just, sometimes I wonder if all this is too much for me. What if I fail?" Jennifer sat in the chair across from his desk. "Mark, do you remember what you told me on the first day, after you were humiliated?" "Not exactly. You said you wouldn't let it slide, that you'd make things right. At the time I thought you were just talking about Richard and the restaurant, but now I understand you were talking about something much bigger." Marcus smiled. "Maybe you're right. Maybe everything that happened was preparing me for this moment." "I'm sure it was, Mark, and I'll be here to support you every step of the way." A year after the first humiliation, Marcus stood on stage at the New York Convention Center, speaking to an audience of over 1,000 business owners about inclusion and diversity. "Exactly 1 year ago," he began his speech, "I was kicked out of a restaurant because the manager thought people like me didn't belong there. Today, that same restaurant is considered the model of inclusion in our city." The audience applauded. "I'm not here to talk about revenge or how I humiliated those who humiliated me. I'm here to talk about transformation, how a painful situation can become an opportunity to create positive change." Marcus shared his entire story, from the first humiliation to the changes he implemented at the Royale. Prejudice benefits no one, he continued. When you discriminate, you miss opportunities to meet incredible people, learn new things and grow as a person and as a business. In the audience, Marcus saw attentive faces, some clearly moved by his story. Richard, my former employee who humiliated me, now manages a restaurant in Miami and is one of the strongest advocates for inclusion I know. It shows people can change, learn, and become better. After the speech, a silver-haired woman approached the stage. Mr. Johnson, my name is Catherine. I own a hotel chain and want to implement the same changes you made. Can you help me? Others followed. Within 2 hours, Marcus had received over 50 consulting requests. Jennifer, he said to his partner when they got home, I think we just found our next business. Inclusion and diversity consulting? Exactly. We can use our experience at the Royale to help other businesses transform. 2 years later, Marcus and Jennifer's consulting firm, Business Transformation, had helped over 200 establishments in New York City implement inclusion policies. The Royale remained the model to follow and had become one of the city's most famous and successful restaurants. Marcus was in his new office, much larger than the previous one, when he received a special visitor. It was Jamal, Mrs. Dorothy's grandson, now 14 years old. Mr. Marcus, I wanted to talk to you about my future. Of course, Jamal. What's on your mind? I want to study business administration like you. And when I graduate, I want to work at your company, helping transform other places. Marcus smiled, remembering how the boy had cried 2 years earlier when he was denied service at the Royale. Jamal, it would be an honor to have you on our team, but first you need to finish school and graduate. I will, Mr. Marcus, and I'll be the top student in college. I'm sure you will, Jamal. When Jamal left, Marcus reflected on how a humiliating situation had turned into a force for such profound change. Hundreds of people now had better jobs. Thousands of customers were treated with more respect, and a new generation was growing up with different values. His phone rang. It was Richard calling from Miami. Marcus, how are you? Hi, Richard. Everything good there? Everything's great. I wanted to share some news. Our restaurant here in Miami just received an award from the city for excellence in inclusive service. Richard, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Marcus, I'll never be able to thank you enough for giving me a second chance, for teaching me there's a better way to live and treat people. Richard, you achieved this transformation on your own. I just created the opportunity. Well, I wanted to ask you something. The city of Miami wants to implement a program similar to New York's. Would you be willing to come give a talk? Of course, Richard. It would be my pleasure. 3 years after the first humiliation, Marcus was being honored by the New York City Council for his contributions to promoting equality and inclusion in the city. The Royale had become an international symbol of how businesses can be profitable and socially responsible at the same time. During the ceremony, Marcus asked to speak for a special address. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, 3 years ago, I was just a young businessman who was humiliated at a restaurant. Today, I'm here receiving an honor that truly belongs to everyone who believed we can build a better world. He looked into the audience and saw familiar faces. Patricia, now a respected and happy manager, Deshawn, who had become a renowned chef, Mrs. Dorothy and Jamal, who was about to start college, Jennifer, his steadfast partner in all these transformations. This honor isn't mine, it's yours, all of you who prove change is possible when we have the courage to confront our prejudices and build bridges instead of walls. Applause filled the auditorium, but Marcus knew this wasn't the most important part of his journey. The most important part was the small daily transformations. Every African American now welcomed at a restaurant, every employee proud of their work, every business owner who had learned to value diversity. When the ceremony ended, Marcus and Jennifer walked through the streets of New York toward the Royale. It was their tradition. Whenever something important happened, they returned to where it all began. Mark, Jennifer said as they walked, do you have any regrets about these 3 years? Marcus thought for a moment. You know, Jennifer, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just accepted the humiliation and moved on. Maybe I'd have a quieter life, with fewer responsibilities. And would you want that? No, Marcus answered without hesitation, because I've learned that the peace that comes from ignoring injustice isn't true peace at all. True peace comes from knowing you've made a difference in people's lives. They arrived at the Royale and saw a line of people waiting to dine. The clientele was diverse: African-American families, interracial couples, groups of friends from different backgrounds, white executives dining with African-American colleagues as complete equals. "Look at this, Mark," Jennifer said, pointing at the scene. 3 years ago, you were thrown out of here. Today, this place is the symbol of the New York City we want to build. Marcus observed the restaurant's activity through the window. He saw Mrs. Patricia welcoming guests with her warm smile, Deshawn in the kitchen, leading a diverse and motivated team, servers of all colors attending to customers with the same respect and attention. "Jennifer, do you know what the most beautiful part of this whole story is?" "What?" "It doesn't end here. Every person transformed by these experiences will carry that change to other places, to other situations. Jamal will graduate and help other companies. Richard is already transforming Miami. The business owners who participated in our consulting are spreading these ideas across the United States." "It's like a chain reaction," Jennifer agreed. "Exactly. And it all started with a humiliation that could have destroyed me, but that I chose to turn into strength for change." They entered the restaurant and were warmly welcomed by the entire team. Mrs. Patricia escorted them to their favorite table, the same one where Marcus had been rejected 3 years earlier. "Mr. Marcus," Mrs. Patricia said, serving him a glass of wine, "I'll never tire of thanking you for everything you've done for us." "Mrs. Patricia, we did it all together. I just had the initial idea." "Mr. Marcus," Deshawn appeared at the table with a special dish. "I prepared something special for you today. It's a dish that tells our story, a blend of American flavors representing all the cultures that now coexist harmoniously here." Marcus tasted the dish and smiled. It was delicious, but more than that, it was symbolic. Ingredients that once never mixed now created perfect harmony. As they were finishing dinner, a young African-American woman around 20 years old approached the table. "Mr. Marcus, sorry to bother you. My name is Tiffany. I'm a culinary arts student, and I'm doing my thesis on the Royale's transformation." "Hello, Tiffany. How can I help you?" "I wanted to thank you. Because of your story, I found the courage to dream of becoming a chef. Before, I thought fine restaurants weren't for people like me. Now I know I can go as far as I want." Marcus was moved by the young woman's words. "Tiffany, talent has no color, no social class. If you have a passion for culinary arts and dedicate yourself to your studies, you can go very far." "Thank you, Mr. Marcus. You're an inspiration to me and many other African-American youth." After Tiffany walked away, Jennifer looked at Marcus with a proud smile. "Mark, do you realize what just happened?" "What do you mean?" "A young woman who didn't even exist in your life 3 years ago was inspired by your story to pursue her dreams. How many other Tiffanys are out there, dreaming bigger because of what you've done?" Marcus grew thoughtful. It was impossible to measure the full impact of his actions, but knowing he was inspiring people to believe in themselves was the greatest reward he could receive. As they were leaving the restaurant, Marcus stopped in front of the mirror near the exit. He remembered the first day when he'd been thrown out wearing the same beige sweater he had on now. The same person, the same place, but everything completely different. "Jennifer," he said, adjusting his sweater, "do you think if I hadn't been humiliated that day, I would have discovered my true life's purpose?" "Honestly, I don't think so. Sometimes life puts us in difficult situations to show us what we're capable of. So in a strange way, I should thank Richard for kicking me out of here." "Maybe you should," Jennifer laughed, "but I think you already did by giving him a second chance." They left the restaurant and walked slowly through the illuminated streets of New York City. The city remained the same, but for Marcus, everything had changed. He was no longer just a successful businessman. He was someone who had discovered that true success comes from using your resources and influence to make the world a better place. 5 years after the first humiliation, Marcus was in Washington, D.C. at Congress, invited to testify in a public hearing about discrimination in commercial establishments. His story had inspired a national bill that would ban discriminatory practices in restaurants, hotels, and other businesses. Mr. Marcus Johnson, the committee chair, addressed him. Could you tell this committee how your personal experience inspired the national movement for equality in customer service? Marcus stepped up to the microphone and looked at the representatives present. It was a historic moment. His individual story was about to become a law that would protect millions of Americans. Members of Congress, he began. 5 years ago, I was kicked out of a restaurant in New York City because of the color of my skin. At that moment, I had two choices: accept the humiliation in silence or turn it into strength for change. I chose the second option. He told his entire story, from the first humiliation to the transformations he had implemented in hundreds of establishments across the United States. This law isn't about revenge or punishment, he concluded. It's about building a country where all people are treated with the dignity they deserve, regardless of color, background, or social class. The hearing ended with a round of applause, and 3 months later, the Marcus Johnson Act was passed by Congress, establishing severe penalties for businesses that practiced discrimination. At the signing ceremony, Marcus stood beside the President of the United States when the historic moment took place. Mr. Johnson, the President said after signing the law, you turned a personal injustice into national justice. That's what I call true leadership. Mr. President, I only did what anyone should do when they witness injustice: act to change it. When Marcus returned to New York City, he found the Royale busier than ever. The restaurant had become a tourist attraction, with people coming from all over the country to visit the place where the transformation had begun. Patricia, now 50 and recognized as one of the best restaurant managers in the country, greeted him with a warm hug. Mr. Johnson, I have a surprise for you. What surprise? Patricia led him to a wall where a golden plaque hung. Read it, she said with tears in her eyes. Marcus read the plaque aloud. In this restaurant, in March 2025, Marcus Johnson turned humiliation into inspiration, discrimination into inclusion, and hate into love. May his story inspire future generations to always choose justice over revenge. Patricia, this is beautiful. Mr. Johnson, it's not just a plaque. It's a daily reminder for all of us that change is possible when we have the courage to make a difference. Deshawn appeared from the kitchen, now recognized as one of the most talented chefs in the country. Marcus, I have some news for you. I just got an invitation to open a restaurant in New York using the same principles of inclusion we learned here. Deshawn, that's fantastic. Are you going to accept? I am. And do you know what the restaurant's name will be? The Royale Brazil, where everyone belongs. Marcus smiled, realizing the seed planted 5 years earlier was growing and spreading across the world. That same day, he received a call from Richard, who now ran a chain of inclusive restaurants in 5 cities along the New York coast. Marcus, I have to tell you something amazing that happened today. What is it, Richard? A Japanese family came to our restaurant in Miami. They told me they're tourists and came to the United States specifically to visit the Transformation restaurants inspired by your story. Really? Really? They said a similar movement is starting in Japan, inspired by what we've done here. Marcus, our story is changing the world. After hanging up, Marcus sat at his table in the Royale and reflected on the extraordinary journey his life had become. From a personal humiliation had emerged a national movement for social change. Jennifer joined him, carrying a thick envelope. Mark, more speaking invitations came in, this time from Paris, London, and Tokyo. Jennifer, sometimes I'm amazed at how one decision can change not just our lives, but so many others too. And you haven't seen anything yet, Jennifer smiled mysteriously. I have one last surprise for you. What surprise? Jennifer turned on the TV at the table and tuned into an international news channel. And today, in London, the first European restaurant based on the American model of inclusion created by Marcus Johnson opened. The Johnson Brazilian experience promises to revolutionize how businesses approach diversity in England. Marcus watched the report in shock. His story had literally crossed the ocean and was inspiring change on other continents. Jennifer, this is surreal. Mark, do you realize your story doesn't belong just to you anymore? It's become a treasure for everyone who believes in a better world. That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in a long time. He walked alone through the streets of New York City, reflecting on everything that had happened. He stopped in front of a school and saw children of all colors playing together in the yard. He thought about how different their world would be from the one he'd grown up in. His phone rang. It was Jamal, now 17, and about to take his college entrance exams. "Mr. Marcus, I wanted to give you some news." "Hi, Jamal, what news?" "I just got accepted as the top candidate for Harvard's Business Administration program, and guess what the topic of my essay was?" "What?" "How small actions can create big social change." "I wrote about your story and how it didn't just change the Royale but our whole society." Marcus smiled, moved. "Jamal, I'm sure you'll be an exceptional business leader, and more importantly, a person who makes a difference." "Mr. Marcus, I promise I'll use everything I've learned from you to keep transforming the world." When Marcus hung up, he realized there were tears in his eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of deep fulfillment. He had discovered that true wealth wasn't in how many restaurants he owned or the zeros in his bank account. True wealth was in how many lives he had touched, how many people he had inspired, how much positive change he had created. 10 years after that first humiliation, Marcus was being interviewed for an international documentary about his story. The film would air in over 50 countries, telling how a young American turned discrimination into inclusion. "Mr. Marcus," the journalist asked, "looking back, would you change anything about that first day at the Royale?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "You know, for a long time I felt anger about that day. Then gratitude. Today, I feel only peace. Because I understood that everything that happened was necessary for me to discover my purpose in life." And what is that purpose? To prove that a fairer and more inclusive world isn't just a beautiful dream, but a possible reality when people decide to act instead of simply complaining. What would you say to someone going through a similar situation today? Marcus looked directly at the camera. "I'd say that every injustice carries within it the seed of transformation. You can choose to be a victim of injustice, or you can choose to be the agent of change. The choice is always yours." To close, Mr. Marcus, what is your greatest pride today? "My greatest pride isn't the awards I've received or the laws I've helped create. My greatest pride is knowing there's a generation of young people like Jamal growing up in a world where being different is celebrated, not punished, where diversity is seen as wealth, not a threat." When the interview ended, Marcus returned to the Royale one last time on that special day. The restaurant was closed for a private event, the celebration of 10 years of transformation. Everyone was there. Patricia, now about to retire as the most respected manager in New York City. Deshawn, who had returned from London as a world-renowned chef. Richard, who had become one of the country's greatest advocates for inclusion. Mrs. Dorothy, now 78 but still full of energy. Jamal, with a degree in business administration and working at Marcus's company as director of new projects. "Everyone," Marcus addressed the guests. "When I walked into this restaurant 10 years ago, I was just a young businessman with a dream of dining in a beautiful place. Today I leave here as a completely different person, one who learned that the greatest dreams aren't about what we can achieve for ourselves, but what we can do for others." Applause echoed through the room. But Marcus knew this was just another chapter in a story that would continue to be written by all the people touched by his experience. Jennifer approached him with one final toast. "Mark, do you remember what you told me on the first day? That you wouldn't let it slide?" "I do. You kept your promise, and you did so much more than that. You turned your pain into hope for millions of people." Marcus raised his glass and looked around the room. He saw faces of all colors, ages and backgrounds, all united by the belief that a better world was possible. He saw genuine smiles, warm embraces, joyful conversations among people who might never have met if not for the transformation that began there. "Jennifer," he said, clinking his glass with hers, "what's happened here over the last 10 years has taught me that love always defeats hate, unity always overcomes division, and hope always triumphs over fear." When the party ended and everyone had left, Marcus stayed alone in the restaurant for a few minutes. He sat at the table where it all began and closed his eyes, remembering that first day of humiliation that had turned into the greatest blessing of his life. When he opened his eyes, he saw his reflection in the restaurant window. He was no longer the scared, angry young man from 10 years ago. He was a mature, fulfilled man who had found his purpose and was living it every day. Marcus stood up, adjusted the same beige sweater he'd worn on that first day, and walked toward the exit. At the door, he turned one last time to look at the restaurant that had changed his life, and that he had changed forever. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for showing me who I truly am." With that whisper of gratitude, Marcus left the Royale knowing his story of transformation would inspire people around the world, proving that a single act of courage can change not just one life, but an entire society. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of perseverance and change. Do you believe Marcus made the right decision by turning his humiliation into strength for change? Share your thoughts in the comments about how small actions can lead to big social transformations. Don't forget to like if the story moved you, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.